Hey guys, it's Ice again. I got a knife review for you today on a classic Benchmade knife, the 707 model sequel. I'll get through the stats first and then get into my observations on this knife. The overall length is 6.75 inches. The blade length is 2.95 inches, very small blade. Blade thickness is 0.1 inches. The blade steel is 154 cm. The Rockwell hardness is 58 to 60. It's a modified clip point / drop point blade shape. It is a flat grind, satin finish. This is the serrated version. The handle length is 3.8 inches. The handle thickness, and this is a very important stat, is 0.42 inches. The handle scales are black aluminum with G10 inlays. The weight is 2.6 ounces. The pocket clip is tip up and it is ambidextrous, but it is not reversible. It's a manual knife, it's not assisted or auto. It has the proprietary axis lock from Benchmade. It was designed by McHenry and Williams, a father and stepson. It's in Benchmade's blue class. And of course it was made in the USA. The knife is $140.25 off Blade HQ. Now I'm going to get into my observations on this knife. I always go over the blade first. So this blade is classified as a modified clip point. Honestly, I could see why it would be called that because the point does come down quite a far ways after this axis. However, it is a smooth, gradual descent. So I think technically this would be a drop point. But because of that very deep swedge, I think it could also ease into the realm of a modified clip point. This blade is very short, it's under 3 inches, so with that serrated part, you are taking away a decent amount of cutting distance on the fine edge. However, you do still have quite a bit of blade real estate to work with there. 154 cm is a stainless steel, so on all of my stainless steel knives I prefer to have a satin finish. I don't want a black coated blade. The reason for that is that with black coated blades, even though they are good in some aspects, like tactical when you don't want your blade to be seen, with hard utility use, eventually that coating is going to wear off in certain spots instead of others, and it looks really bad in my opinion. It just makes the knife look really cheap. Whereas with the satin finish blade, when it's just the bare steel, you don't have to worry about anything wearing off, and I think it looks really nice. So it's a way to have a very fine knife without worrying about having to use it. This blade is very similar to the Benchmade Griptilian, specifically the Mini Griptilian. The Mini Griptilian and this are basically identical, except for the grip, of course. The Griptilian has a much wider grip. It's 0.51 or 0.53 inches thick, I believe, one of those two. The Mini Griptilian is more for comfort while you're using it, whereas this knife is more for comfort while you're carrying it. And you'll notice that in the thickness of the handle. You'll notice that in the weight, 2.6 ounces. But in all other respects, it's identical. You know, they both use 154 cm steel. They both have stainless steel liners. They both have the axis lock. They both have the same, almost the exact same blade length. Except with this one, unlike the Griptilian, where the blade comes in, this one has a much deeper swedge. So that makes it a bit better for self-defense because it's going to be better for piercing through materials. A lot of people ask, why would you get this over the mini grip? I mean, they're basically the same knife. The mini grip is just 50 bucks less, and you're getting the same steel, same lock, same mechanism, same fit and finish from Benchmade. The big thing you're paying for, number one, is McHenry and Williams, that custom knife maker who paired with Benchmade, and you're paying for the carryability, how narrow that handle is. Along with machined aluminum handles, the Griptilian does not have those. In fact, the Griptilian doesn't even have G10. The Griptilian has Noril GTX handles, so it's a bit cheaper. but you're getting the same basic knife, just a lot cheaper when you get the Griptilian. And I think that's why the mini grip has been so successful, is because it's basically the same knife, just much cheaper. But for those who really want a nice carryable knife, a bit more carryable, it is something to mention. And as with all Benchmade blades, what I love about having a satin finish on a Benchmade is that you can see the lines so clearly, whereas when you get a coating on it, even with Benchmade's very clear Cerakote, it's still not quite as fine as just bare steel. And what I love about Benchmade's bare steel blades is that you can see the lines just so clearly. They're extremely fine. You can tell that their stock removal process is incredibly precise and accurate, in that those swedges stop at the exact same point on both sides. They both have a very flat portion here, and then it curves back up. Just very minute details right there that you're paying for, essentially. Now, personally, if this was me buying the knife, I wouldn't get this version. I would get the other Benchmade McHenry and Williams knife, the Benchmade 710, which is basically the same thing as this. It's just in a 4.2-inch blade of D2. And I think, you're only paying about $10 more, I believe, for that one, but you're getting like 1.2 inches more of blade length, so a much bigger blade. And you're getting the same quality and everything. And what I love about Benchmade's flat grinds is that you can see how clear the flat grind is. Whereas with some of the other flat grinds, like ZT and things like that, it's not quite as clear, just how linear that surface is, you could say. Whereas with this, it's just incredibly flat. I know it sounds weird, but it is true through and through a true flat grind. Now I'll go over the handle. The handle is sort of where this knife falls short, especially in a lot of people's minds, is that this is a great knife, but it just falls short in the handle because it has this really short handle. The choil, you could say, is really far back, and the handle is short. So on a short handle, usually you want to have the choil up front so that you can get as many fingers on there as possible. But your finger just sort of naturally wants to reside right here, and the pinky sort of just falls off the end. It doesn't really have anything to grab onto. So this is going to be a good knife for people with small hands. It's going to be a good knife for females. They have smaller hands. Someone who wants to carry a knife for self-defense. It's a great knife for utility as well because it has this excellent thumb ramp up here. It's got jimping on the handle scales. It's got jimping on that choil and right here. Something interesting about this is that the jimping right here, it's sort of like a secondary choil because this part isn't sharpened, this isn't sharpened, so you can actually choke up a little bit and you can get really close to the edge if you need to. So it does have that suggestive affordance of choking upon it, which is really nice. In terms of the rest of the handle though, I'm not a huge fan because it uses this machined aluminum, which has sort of a cheap feel to it. And the pocket clip, while it does have that arrow style pocket clip that is very well, it grips very well, it has a really bad finish on it. It comes off very easily. You can watch a Cutlery Lover's review of this knife where he's able to scratch off the finish with his fingernail. I mean, that's an incredibly weak finish. Even just when sliding in and out of my pocket, that coating rubs off on the underside onto my pocket. Just my jeans are able to rub off that coating. So this handle is going to show wear very easily, which is a little bit disappointing because with a knife designed by McHenry and Williams and made by Benchmade, I sort of was expecting a little bit better longevity of classiness, you could say. What I love about this knife is that one very underplayed stat is the handle thickness. People never pay attention to this. All these knife websites never pay attention to that stat, the handle thickness. But in my opinion, that is the most important stat about the knife, because the handle thickness shows how much chafing you're going to get, how hard it's going to be to carry the knife, And that's ultimately the most important thing, because the knife you have on you is the knife you're going to use. If you don't have it on you, you're not going to use it. So things like, the Benchmade Adamus, the 0.73 inch thick handle. It's like almost double the thickness of this. It's huge. Some people, they buy it with the intention of trying to carry it every day, and they, just experience so much discomfort that they never have it on them. They're just like, I don't want to carry that today. It's just too uncomfortable. When something happens, then they don't have it. So in my opinion, I'd rather have a thinner handled knife that you have than a thicker handled knife that you don't have. That's just, the logical option to me. These G10 inlays don't really feel a lot like G10. They sort of feel a little bit like Zytel, not quite G10. They're definitely not very grippy, and they're not meant for grip, they're meant for aesthetics because of the placement of them. You're going to get a little bit of fingertip grip, but that's not what you need when you grip a knife. You need grip on the edges. So it's mainly meant for, on this side, aesthetics. On this side, it actually does provide a decent amount of pocket retention on that pocket clip. So the pocket clip does work very well. Now, another thing I noticed about this knife is, unlike a lot of Benchmade's other axis lock knives, this has the liner visible open from the handle scale. So you can see the liner in there, whereas with a lot of Benchmade's other axis lock knives, the handle scale and the liner are cut to the same shape on that hole. So I thought that was kind of interesting that it's a little more open. There's pros and cons to that. Cons might be that you could get gunk and stuff in there, it'd be harder to clean out. The pros is that it's a little easier to access. It's an incredibly smooth lock. It's very easy to disengage. And this knife is buttery smooth. Like all the other reviews have said, this knife is ridiculous. I mean, you barely put any effort into this and it just comes flying open. It's not an assisted knife, but this is probably the easiest to open unassisted knife I've ever got my hands on. So it's incredibly easy to open and close. It's very smooth. It's very intuitive. The lockup is solid. No blade play on the one I got, and I love the axis lock. Because it's out of the way, it's not engaging any part of your hand while you're using it, but it's still very easy to access and close the knife one-handed. So I mean, the axis lock is sort of ideal in my mind. It's out of the way, it's incredibly easy to access, and it's ambidextrous, and it's incredibly strong. I believe the Benchmade Adamus with the axis lock was one of, if not the strongest folding knife on the planet at one point. Don't cite me on that. It's amazing the strength of these axis locks. Now, these steel liners are skeletonized a little bit, not nearly as much as a lot of the other knives I've seen. They just have small holes milled out here and there, but it does help to reduce weight quite a bit. And you'll notice this knife has no bars, no pillars. Instead, it just has all of the body screws on this spacer right here. And I kind of like that because it makes it a little easier to clean. Because when you're trying to like maneuver around all those bars and everything when you're cleaning, it's a little bit of a hassle. So I kind of like it that it has this spacer that wraps all the way to the tip here. And so when you close it, it's protecting that tip. The centering on this is impeccable. The fit and finish is amazing, just like on almost all Benchmade knives. Now, another thing about the handle scales on this axis lock, you can see, I don't know if you can see it in the camera, but if you look straight down in there, you can see it's sort of hollow right there. And that's obviously for the spring of the axis lock to go down. I'm not sure if those handle scales are also milled out throughout this. I wouldn't be surprised if they are, but you could probably find out by just disassembling one or looking at a disassemblage video. In terms of the choice of steel, 154 cm, you're getting a 2.9 inch chunk of 154 cm for $140. You could get a lot more for a lot less if you went other places. Like for example, you could go to Spyderco and you could get like almost a 4-inch chunk of S30V full flat ground for $80. I sort of would have liked to see a little bit better steel for $140. I mean, if you're paying $140, you should be getting a super steel. I don't care what fit and finish kind of knife it is. If it's a custom knife, that's different. I'll take a custom knife out of 440C for $140. But a production knife for $140, you should be getting a super steel. 154 cm, it doesn't perform up to the level of a super steel like S30V or M390 or even the tool steels like D2 or CPM M4. It doesn't perform up to that level. I'm glad they have a high quality stainless steel at least, but I think for $140 it's a little bit cheap for them not to give you a super steel. That said, 154 cm is an excellent steel, widely used by Benchmade. It's not too hard to work, whereas S30V is a lot harder to work very accurately. I'm going to give you guys a close-up of the knife here. So there's that beautiful satin 154 cm flat ground modified clip point swedge blade. Came razor sharp right out of the box, by the way. McHenry and Williams 154 cm US patent. And there's the axis lock, machined aluminum scales, G10 inlays. There's that arrow pocket clip with the terrible finish. There's the other side of the blade. So if you're looking for a knife that is incredibly easy to carry, is incredibly lightweight, it's very small. This knife struck me out of the box how tiny it was. But it's high quality, something that you're gonna have great fit and finish, a decent steel, great lockup, things like that. This is really the knife you're looking for. Benchmade 707 sequel, $140.25 off Blade HQ. Thanks for listening, guys. Please comment, rate, and subscribe.